a covert operation that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in 72 hours. 72 hours that changed the entire calculus of Middle Eastern security. 72 hours that exposed Iran's most guarded nuclear secrets. 72 hours that brought two nations to the very edge of open warfare. What Benjamin Netanyahu authorized this week crossed a line that the international community had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, Tehran did not hesitate. They responded with fury, with threats, and with a mobilization that has not been seen since the height of tensions in 2020. But here's what makes this story different from every other confrontation we've covered. This time, Netanyahu wasn't acting alone. This time, there was a phone call. A phone call to Mar-a-Lago. A phone call that sources say lasted 47 minutes. And when that call ended, President Donald Trump gave something Netanyahu had been waiting years to receive. A green light. A full, unambiguous, operational green light. What followed was one of the most audacious intelligence operations in modern history. And tonight, for the first time, we can reveal what actually happened. For 18 months now, there had been signals, not from official channels, not from diplomatic sources, just signals that Israel was preparing something unprecedented against Iran's nuclear program. Netanyahu has been aggressive, yes, but he has been calculated in his aggression. His moves have followed a certain rhythm, a predictability, almost a choreography that allowed observers to anticipate Israel's next steps. But what set off alarm bells in Washington, London, and Berlin this month was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Israeli military movements know the indicators: the unusual flight patterns over the Mediterranean, the sudden redeployment of Dolphin-class submarines, the activation of cyber units that had been dormant since the Stuxnet era, the sudden reassignment of Mossad's most senior field operatives. All of that went quiet. And whenever Netanyahu goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Iranian intelligence noticed too. In the weeks leading up to this operation, Tehran had increased security around its Fordow facility by 300%. They had moved their most sensitive centrifuge arrays deeper underground. They had activated air defense systems that had been purchased from Russia specifically for this scenario. But none of it was enough, because what Netanyahu had planned wasn't a strike. It wasn't a bombing campaign. It wasn't anything Iran had prepared for. It was something far more sophisticated, something that would expose Iran's nuclear program to the entire world, something that would make denial impossible. Early Tuesday morning, Israeli intelligence detected what they described as an anomalous communication burst from deep within Iran's military command structure, including encrypted traffic that had not been intercepted in over 7 years. These are the kinds of transmissions that Iranian leadership only uses when they are signaling something very specific: imminent nuclear advancement, a major policy shift, or preparation for confrontation. Western intelligence agencies didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was changing its nuclear posture. And when a threshold state shifts its nuclear posture without explanation, even by the smallest measure, every intelligence service on Earth pays attention. What happened next remains partially classified, but here's what we can confirm. At approximately 0300 hours local time, a team of operatives, their nationality still officially unconfirmed but widely attributed to Israel's elite Qaeda unit, penetrated Iranian territory through a route that intelligence officials describe as unprecedented in its audacity. They weren't there to destroy. They were there to extract. And what they extracted has sent shockwaves through every capital that matters. Documents, thousands of them. Technical specifications for warhead miniaturization, delivery system schematics, and most damning of all, evidence that Iran had restarted weapons-grade enrichment at a facility the IA didn't even know existed. The warning issued by Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Source after source who attended emergency meetings in Tehran described Netanyahu's move as provocative, escalatory, and perhaps most importantly, successful, which is what made it unforgivable in Iranian eyes. But provocation only works if the target hesitates. Israel did not. In fact, their operational tempo today was among the most aggressive we've seen since the 1967 Six-Day War. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of Iran's threat to annihilate the Zionist entity, Israel scrambled 47 F-35I Adir stealth fighters. These weren't the standard patrol configurations. These were full combat loadouts, precision munitions, electronic warfare suites, and extended-range fuel tanks that Israel only deploys when they are preparing for deep strike operations. Simultaneously, Israeli Defense Forces activated their Arrow 3 and David's Sling missile defense systems to unprecedented readiness levels. And in a move that has not been publicly acknowledged until now, 2 Israeli Dolphin-class submarines capable of launching nuclear-armed cruise missiles moved into positions that sources describe as within striking distance of multiple Iranian coastal targets. This wasn't posturing. This was preparation. Tonight, Pentagon sources confirmed that Israel launched precision strikes on 17 Iranian-linked targets across Syria and Lebanon, including a weapons depot near Damascus that had recently been reinforced for what analysts believe was imminent transfer of advanced missiles to Hezbollah. Israel struck before Iran could coordinate its response. They hit the weapons depot. They hit a command center in Tartus that served as the primary coordination point between Iranian Revolutionary Guard advisors and Syrian military units. They hit 3 convoy vehicles that were likely preparing to move advanced anti-ship missiles toward the Lebanese border. In other words, Israel targeted the logistics chain, the supply network that would have made a coordinated Iranian response operational. This is what made Khamenei's warning so urgent. Iran's position wasn't just threatened, it was compromised. The covert operation represented the kind of intelligence breach that could set Iran's nuclear program back years if the extracted documents were shared with international inspectors. And Netanyahu, understanding that fully, responded to Iran's threats with overwhelming force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. Israel didn't target Iranian territory directly. They didn't escalate to the point of triggering Iranian treaty obligations with Russia or China. They hit the networks. They hit the supply lines. They demonstrated capability without crossing the threshold that would demand a full-scale Iranian military response. And that precision is what has intelligence analysts around the world both impressed and deeply concerned, because it shows that Netanyahu has wargamed this scenario extensively. It shows that Israel knows exactly how far they can push. And it shows that someone, almost certainly in Washington, gave them the confidence to push that far. And here's where the story becomes even more explosive. Intelligence officials now believe that Iran's recent nuclear acceleration was designed to test the resolve of Western powers after years of failed diplomatic engagement. Tehran wanted to see whether the Biden administration's approach of strategic patience would continue under renewed Trump leadership. But instead, the opposite happened. Trump didn't counsel restraint. He didn't urge diplomatic channels. He authorized what sources describe as the most comprehensive U.S.-Israeli intelligence sharing operation since the founding of the Jewish state. You don't get Netanyahu's attention easily. But tonight, Trump did. Former Israeli intelligence officers speaking with international media under anonymity described Trump's shift as a strategic realignment, a way to signal that the era of Iranian nuclear ambiguity was ending. But Netanyahu proved today that Israel remains both willing and capable. Their strikes were not only precise, they were timed so perfectly that Iranian air defenses never acquired a single Israeli aircraft on radar. That timing matters because it shows something critical. It shows that Israel has penetrated Iran's air defense networks at the software level. It shows that Netanyahu is not simply reacting to Iranian threats. He is shaping the battlefield. He is controlling the tempo. He is dictating the terms of engagement, and that represents a fundamental shift in how this shadow war will be fought going forward. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Israel's integrated response. The Israeli Air Force carried out over 120 sorties in a 6-hour window, forcing Syrian air defenses to exhaust nearly 40% of their ready missile inventory. Israeli naval vessels targeted a cargo ship in the eastern Mediterranean that had been flagged by intelligence services as transporting advanced drone components in the last 72 hours. Cyber command units operating from classified locations reportedly disabled communications arrays used by Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders to coordinate with proxy forces across the region. This wasn't just a strike. This wasn't just a show of force. This was a comprehensive degradation campaign. This was strategic suppression. And strategic suppression is the one thing Iran has struggled to counter since the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. For every advance Iran has made in its nuclear program, Israel has countered with something that undermines the security infrastructure protecting it. For every proxy Iran has armed, Israel has demonstrated the ability to strike those proxies with impunity. For every threat Iran has issued, Israel has answered with action. And tonight's operation may represent the most decisive answer yet. Remember, Iran thought the international community had lost interest in their nuclear ambitions. They thought the collapse of the JCPOA meant they could advance without scrutiny. They thought Israel wouldn't dare conduct operations of this magnitude without guaranteed American support. They thought the Abraham Accords had isolated Israel diplomatically from its regional neighbors. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. The international community is demanding IAEA access to the newly revealed facility. Gulf Arab states are quietly providing Israel with intelligence and overflight permissions. American support isn't just guaranteed, it's enthusiastic. And the Abraham Accords partners are publicly silent, but privately supportive. Iran miscalculated, and that miscalculation may prove to be the most consequential strategic error Tehran has made in decades. What makes this moment so dangerous and so pivotal is that Iran's latest nuclear acceleration happened at a time when Supreme Leader Khamenei is under unprecedented domestic pressure. Hardliners within the Revolutionary Guard want confrontation. Reformists want economic relief from sanctions. The Iranian street wants an end to international isolation. Regional allies like Hezbollah want resources that Iran increasingly cannot provide. Khamenei is balancing these demands while managing a succession crisis that everyone knows is coming, but no one is allowed to discuss publicly. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. Netanyahu knows this. Trump knows this. And that knowledge informed every aspect of this week's operation. They weren't just targeting Iran's nuclear program. They were targeting Khamenei's political standing. They were exposing the gap between Iranian rhetoric and Iranian capability. They were showing the Iranian people and the Iranian military that their leadership cannot protect the nation's most sensitive secrets. That psychological dimension may ultimately prove more damaging than any physical strike could have been. The White House statement, now distributed to every major news outlet, was designed to signal that the United States is not willing to allow Iranian nuclear breakout under any circumstances. Senior administration officials said plainly that Iran's concealed enrichment activities were inconsistent with any legitimate civilian nuclear program. That is diplomatic language for, "We know you're building a bomb, and we're done pretending otherwise." You don't usually hear that tone from Washington unless something serious is at stake. The State Department has already begun coordinating with European allies on an emergency referral to the UN Security Council. Treasury officials are preparing the most comprehensive sanctions package since the maximum pressure campaign of Trump's first term. And Defense Department sources confirm that additional American assets, including a carrier strike group, are being repositioned to the Persian Gulf as a precautionary measure. This is not business as usual. This is preparation for escalation. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Israeli Knesset in a defiant, measured speech tonight. He said, "Israel will never allow those who call for our destruction to acquire the means to achieve it." He said, "The documents our brave men and women retrieve prove what we have long suspected. Iran is not pursuing energy. Iran is pursuing extinction." And he said, "To our enemies, I say clearly, we know where you hide. We know what you're building, and we will never allow you to use it." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a leader who understands just how high the stakes have become. Netanyahu is not speaking to the Iranian government. He is speaking to the Iranian people. He is speaking to the international community. He is speaking to history. And history, tonight, is watching very closely. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's nuclear acceleration wasn't isolated. Along with the concealed enrichment program, Hezbollah has also mobilized an additional 15,000 fighters along the Lebanese border. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq launched 3 separate attacks on American installations in the last 72 hours. Houthi forces in Yemen increased missile and drone attacks targeting international shipping in the Red Sea. All of this happened within the same week. When Iran moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. Intelligence analysts call this horizontal escalation, the strategy of pressuring adversaries across multiple fronts simultaneously to dilute their response capability. But Israel's operation tonight demonstrated something Iran didn't expect. Israel can respond on multiple fronts simultaneously too, and they can do it with precision that Iran's proxy forces cannot match. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing to accelerate toward weapons-grade enrichment at the newly revealed facility before international inspectors can gain access. Another is that Iran is attempting to create a crisis atmosphere that will pressure European nations to break from American sanctions policy. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to present the international community with a fait accompli, a nuclear weapon that already exists and cannot be diplomatically reversed. But today, Netanyahu took that card off the table. Israel didn't wait for diplomatic consensus. They didn't wait for UN authorization. They didn't wait for definitive proof that a weapon had been completed. They acted on intelligence that suggested Iran was approaching the point of no return. And they acted decisively enough to set the program back before that point could be reached. What we're watching now is a test of deterrence. Iran wants to see whether its threats of regional war will cause Israel to pause. Israel wants to show that no threat will prevent defensive action against existential dangers. The United States wants to prevent a broader regional conflict that could disrupt global energy markets. And the international community wants to prevent a nuclear arms race in the most volatile region on Earth. These objectives are not entirely compatible, and the tension between them will define the next phase of this crisis. Netanyahu is betting that strength will produce stability, that demonstrating overwhelming capability will convince Iran that escalation is futile, that showing willingness to act will deter the need for further action. History will judge whether that bet was wise. But tonight, it is the bet that has been made. Tonight, we've heard from regional intelligence services who are now monitoring Iranian military movements with increased urgency. They say Revolutionary Guard naval units in the Strait of Hormuz have been placed on heightened alert. They say Iranian ballistic missile batteries have been activated at multiple sites across the country. And they say Iran's decision to publicly acknowledge losses at the Damascus facility is likely part of a broader narrative strategy intended to justify retaliation without appearing to escalate unprovoked. But Israel is not backing down. In fact, Israel is doubling down. Their response today, comprehensive, precise, and devastating, sent a message to Tehran that the old rules of engagement no longer apply. And it sent a message to Washington that Israel remains the most capable and reliable partner in the region. The Trump administration heard that message clearly, and their response, immediate, public, and unequivocal support, sent a message of its own. America is back in the maximum pressure business. And this time, the pressure will not relent until the threat is eliminated. As the week goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve with its concealed enrichment program. But what we do know is that Israel's operation was timely. It prevented Iran from reaching a point where military options would have become significantly more complicated. It exposed the gap between Iranian claims of transparency and Iranian reality. And it demonstrated to the world that the intelligence extracted in 2018's famous Vault operation was not the end of Israel's penetration of Iranian secrets. It was just the beginning. What happens next will depend on what Tehran does in the next 48 to 72 hours. If they choose de-escalation, this moment will be remembered as the turning point that prevented a nuclear Iran. If they choose escalation, Israel and the United States have already shown they are prepared for that contingency. They have positioned their forces. They have coordinated their response. They have shown they are ready to respond with everything they have. And tonight, for the first time in years, Iran appears to be genuinely uncertain. Tehran is quiet, too quiet. And when Iran is quiet, it means they are calculating. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, the Ayatollahs learned something they perhaps knew but hoped wasn't true. Israel's reach extends further than they imagined. Israel's intelligence penetration runs deeper than they feared. And Israel's willingness to act remains as strong as it has ever been. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Netanyahu's gamble has paid off, for now. Trump's green light has changed the strategic equation in the Middle East, and Iran faces a choice it hoped it would never have to make. We will be here, watching every detail, monitoring every development, analyzing every move, as the next phase of this historic confrontation unfolds. The shadow war is no longer in the shadows, and what happens next will shape the Middle East for generations to come. Stay with us.